everyone, and welcome to episode 33 of Superannuated Starman. I'm host Sean Ryan, and we have a special guest today. That is Missy Prior. Missy, thank you so much for joining us. And if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell the guests about yourself.
Hi, I'm Missy, and I really don't know what to say about myself. I'm a college student. I take care of my mom, and I'm a big fan of video games.
I think we all are. We're going to be missing Corey today. He's got a lot going on. He's not able to join us, but as always, I am joined by my co-host, Chris Duerksen. Chris, how you been?
Not too bad. How about you?
I've been very busy with school, just like Missy has. And it's taken quite a while to get this episode together, but I'm so glad to start doing it. And I'm going to be upfront and say that this will likely be a very long episode because we're going to be discussing The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. But that just means that I can put in a lot of breaks. And in fact, let's take a short break so we can hear some of that amazing music from this amazing game. Released on November 21st, 1998 in Japan, November 23rd in America, and December 11th in Europe, Ocarina of Time was the fifth installment of the Legend of Zelda series, and it was the first game in the franchise to be released on the Nintendo 64 and the first to be made in full 3D. Developed by Nintendo EAD and published by Nintendo themselves, Ocarina of Time was developed concurrently with Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart 64. Ocarina of Time was initially built for play on the Nintendo 64 disk drive, or known as the 64DD. The 64DD was a disk peripheral that was only released in Japan, and that released on December 1st of 1999. Ocarina of Time was migrated to a 16 megabyte cartridge, which was eventually increased to a 32 megabyte, making this Nintendo's largest game ever to that point. There were concerns amongst the team developing the game about data storage constraints of using a cartridge, and one potential solution was to restrict Link to Ganondorf's castle, using it as a central hub, much like Princess Peach's castle in Super Mario 64. Remnants of this concept, that is, traversing in and out of paintings, were used in a boss fight in the Forest Temple dungeon. Development for this game involved more than 120 people, including stunt performers used to capture the effects of sword fighting and Link's movement. Miyamoto initially intended Ocarina of Time to be played in a first-person perspective to enable players to take in the vast terrain of Hyrule Field better, and let the team focus more on developing enemies and environments. The concept was abandoned once the idea of Child Link was introduced, as Miyamoto believed it necessary for Link to be visible on screen. The Z targeting used by the player to lock on the objects and enemies in a 3D space was originally a generic marker to give players the visual cue. This was changed to a fairy by Yoshiaki Koizumi, one of the game's directors. Originally called the Fairy Navigation System, this name was pared down to the nickname Navi, which in turn resulted in a character being given a prominent role in the story. If you've ever played a Mario or Zelda game, then you've probably heard of Koji Kondo, the man behind Ocarina of Time's legendary soundtrack. The music, which plays a pivotal role in the game, was composed using only 5 notes, although you can bend pitches via the analog stick to create additional tones. This was done to create distinct themes that could be played on a real ocarina. And it may be mispronouncing that. It may be ocarina, so
I've
my
always said
apologies.
Ocarina.
I've always said Ocarina.
If it's ocarina or ocarina, I just apologize in advance for however you out there may be saying that particular word. Upon its release on the Nintendo 64, the game was a critical success, receiving perfect scores from most gaming publications that reviewed the game. In the United States, over 500,000 pre-orders were placed, more than tripling the number of pre-orders for any previous video game. Part of this huge uptick in pre-order numbers was because of a limited edition box reading collector's edition. Inside of the box was a gold-colored cartridge, and upon release, more than 1 million copies were sold in less than a week. In 1998 alone, more than 2.5 million copies were sold, despite the game being released only 39 days before the end of the year.
That is nuts.
It absolutely is. The game itself for that time period was just colossal when it came to numbers.
And to be fair, I mean, this is basically the last Link game that they came out with before this. I mean, technically they did do the Game Boy one, but the one before this, like the console game, the last console game was A Link to the Past, which was also an amazing, huge, popular game. So it's no surprise at all that this thing just launched out the gate.
The franchise itself has always been a pillar for Nintendo.
Yeah.
It also helped though, like Sean said earlier, where he was saying how well it was marketed.
That's absolutely true. When it comes to marketing, when I think back to the Super Nintendo and A Link to the Past, like Chris mentioned, I can't really remember marketing for that game. But for Ocarina of Time, I can absolutely remember marketing. And I'm going to talk about that. And I have some questions about it if you guys remember anything.
Actually, and speaking of Link to the Past, can I just mention the fact that, yeah, The Link to the Past was 91, right? And this is 1998. And Link's Awakening was on Game Boy in 93. But like I said, for some reason, for me, I don't count Game Boy games as full console. It's not the same as a console game. So if you go from Link to the Past to Ocarina of Time, that's a 7-year gap in the franchise. And that is a huge, the difference in games in that 7 years is just absolutely huge. I mean, the technology was advancing so much, the consoles were evolving. It felt like we were getting groundbreaking games every few months or every year in between Super Nintendo and 64. And this game is a perfect example of how huge of a step they took from one game to the next. And if you were to compare that to nowadays, I actually looked this up. Overwatch, which Missy and I used to play all the time, that is 7 years old today. And
no,
right now,
it isn't.
Yes, Overwatch is 7 years old. What? And it is pretty much the exact same game now, even though it's called Overwatch 2, it's still the exact same game now as it was when it launched 7 years ago. 7 years ago. If they would have done that with Link, could you imagine if Ocarina of Time was A Link to the Past Part 2 and the difference between A Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time and is just night and day, and it's just I want to point that out, just how amazing of a leap it was between the two games, and how quickly everything changed in the 90s. It's just really amazing.
Chris, to your point, I do want to say that I don't think there's anything wrong with direct sequels like that, because the direct sequel to A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds, was an amazing game, and it came out on a handheld system.
Right. But I'm just saying, just the difference between the two games.
Yes, the step would have been outrageous.
Yeah, and Ocarina of Time would have been completely different if they did it in the same style, in the same top-down view. You know what I mean? The fact that they went to 3D and on the brand new system, it just really, just a giant leap forward.
It absolutely was. And this game itself, to speak to its popularity, it has been released on several platforms since the Nintendo 64. It was made available as a pre-order bonus for the GameCube's The Wind Waker. It was also bundled with some GameCube systems, as well as being a bonus for Nintendo Power subscribers. This particular game included a more difficult version of Ocarina of Time named Master Quest, as well as the standard game itself. It was also part of the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition that was a compilation of Zelda games that included the original Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask. It was later released on the Wii and Wii U Virtual Console and is currently available through the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack, and a 3D remake was released in June of 2011 for the Nintendo 3DS. Because of Ocarina of Time's colossal success, a sequel was quickly greenlit and went into active development. The direct sequel, Majora's Mask, was completed in approximately 1 year by reusing the same engine and graphics from Ocarina of Time. I'm not going to go into Majora's Mask right now because hopefully we'll cover that game in the future. And to change gears a little bit, I want to briefly talk about emulation. And I'm not talking about piracy here, I'm talking about Nintendo's in house emulation efforts. I brought up the 2 game bonus disc that was offered as a pre order bonus for The Wind Waker, and a lot of people mistakenly believe that this was a port of the N64 game to the Nintendo GameCube, when in fact, it was actually emulated. This was done by a software engineer at Nintendo of America by the name of Stephen Lee. Stephen worked on several projects throughout his career, but what I'm going to focus on is his work with the Wii Virtual Console, specifically the N64 emulation. From roughly 2006 to 2011, he and his team were responsible for bringing the select N64 games to the Wii. Each release had its own unique version of the emulator specifically designed for that game. Obviously, there was quite a lot of overlap from game to game, so the emulator wasn't being written entirely from scratch each time, but there were changes made to each emulator to make that specific game run better or correctly if there were rendering issues. The end result was that the emulation provided on the Wii is still regarded as the best available through official means. Unfortunately, this wasn't meant to last as Stephen Lee left Nintendo in August of 2011, and in 2012, Nintendo brought the 21 N64 titles to the Wii U Virtual Console. Instead of using the game-specific emulators that Stephen and his team had built, Nintendo created a single N64 emulator that would run all of the games in their catalog. In addition to this, they added a filter darkening the entire screen to address seizure concerns. Despite the Wii U being more powerful, their emulator introduced audio glitches, rendering issues, and input lag, all of which had been corrected in Stephen's individual emulators. This meant that Nintendo had to patch these problems and just hope that fixing one issue in one game did not cause a problem in another. In 2020, Super Mario 3D All-Stars brought N64 emulation to the Switch in the form of Super Mario 64, proving that Nintendo had ported at least some form of N64 emulation to the latest console. On October 25th, 2021, the Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pass was released, bringing 9 N64 titles to the Switch, Ocarina of Time being one of them. However, the game was plagued with several issues, most notably was the lack of fog in the game. It took months before Nintendo fixed the issues, as well as fixing several other bugs in other games. But talking about the N64 version, the cart, and I may cut this out because it's pretty long, but I thought it was interesting. There were different variations with the physical cart, namely in versions 1.0 and 1.1. Ganondorf had red blood, which was changed to green in 1.2 to maintain the E for Everyone rating, and some religious imagery was also changed. It's well known that Nintendo had removed Christian crosses from cemeteries and the like when porting other games to the North America, but in 1.0 and 1.1, the Fire Temple music was altered because it originally included religious-themed vocals that, when translated, referenced Allah. And originally the Mirror Shield, yeah.
Can I Google that and hear that?
Yes,
or
you can.
Has it been scrubbed?
No, it's still out there. It was Muslim prayer chants.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting.
So it's not just inspired by it, is straight up.
So when Koji Kondo was sampling sounds and audio, he just took this music. He didn't know that it was another language. It just sounds like
sounds like holy music. Yeah.
It just sounds like, there's a lot of echoing, and it doesn't sound necessarily like someone speaking, but obviously if you don't speak Arabic.
Yeah, but if you're Muslim, you're going to catch onto that real quick. And so it was removed, as well as symbols that were on the mirror shield and certain dungeon blocks, because they had a star and crescent moon, and it was replaced with the Gerudo symbol that was also used in Majora's Mask. Those symbols that I referenced before, they resembled the symbol of Islam. The last thing I want to bring up with this game is Ura Zelda and Zelda Gaiden. There are two different expansions, or excuse me, there were two different expansions planned for the Nintendo 64 disk drive.
Zelda would feature an alternate and more difficult dungeons, whereas Zelda Gaiden would include a different overworld. While Zelda Gaiden would evolve into Majora's Mask, Zelda was actually a patch for the Ocarina of Time. The 64DD version was designed so that the original cartridge would be plugged into the main Nintendo 64 console, while Zelda expansion disc would be plugged into the 64DD that sat beneath the console. While Zelda never made its way to the DD, it eventually saw some life as the Master Quest that I mentioned that was a pre-order bonus for the Wind Waker, which remixed all the game's dungeons, and is also available on the 3D remake that came out on the 3DS. So guys, that was a lot. Was there anything that you can think of that I necessarily missed or is important to bring up?
No, I didn't do any research on the history at all. I
Not
was
that
just
I
letting
could
you get
think
through
of.
it.
I actually learned some stuff with this.
Well, with every segment that I do, there's always stuff that's left out. I simply don't have the time to cover every little aspect of the game. But if there's something that you feel I missed, please mention it in a Twitter comment or join our Discord and let us know what I should have included. But with the history of the game out of the way, let's take another break. And when we get back, we'll share our memories of the boy without a fairy. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that music. Missy, as our guest, will you please start us off with some memories of playing this game? Did you play it at launch, or was this something you played later on? If you did play it at launch, did you pre-order it, and did you get that amazing golden cart?
So I was actually 5 years old when this game came out.
So probably not, is what I'm.
No, I think I was 7 when I finally got it. And it was actually for Christmas, I got the Nintendo 64, which was super exciting because it was my first console that was mine and not a hand me down. So I was super excited about that. And the game I got with it was Zelda Ocarina of Time.
For your first game on the first system that is yours entirely, what
Yeah,
an amazing game to get.
it's definitely started my huge love for video games.
I guess before we talk about Ocarina of Time, do you have experience with the rest of the franchise?
The only game that I had besides that, which was a hand-me-down, was the gold cartridge of the original Zelda for NES.
Okay. Did you ever play it or beat it or
I played
what?
it. I don't
But
necessarily remember it too much, but I played it.
yeah, especially if you were getting your N64 at the age of 7, you probably don't have much memories of the original NES.
I actually kept the NES until I was 20.
Yeah, I was gonna say everybody kept their NES for way.
Forever.
Yeah, that was just one of those things like you don't get rid of. When PlayStation 2 came out, you got rid of your PlayStation 1. But when Super Nintendo came out, you still kept your Nintendo.
When it comes to Ocarina of Time, what memories do you have of that game?
So many. So I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere. So the only things that I had available to me was my video games or cornfields. So because I was the
We
only
can
one
both relate to that.
Well, because of that, I was the only one in my group of friends who had an N64. So a lot of times my friends would come over and we'd all play in conjunction with one another.
What are the games you're playing? Because obviously Ocarina of Time is just a single player game, or were they watching you play, or were you
Oh,
experiencing this as a group?
so it was definitely a single player game, but what happened was is me and my best friend, we would sit there and play it until probably like 3 o'clock in the morning. And again, we're like 7. So anytime there was something scary and one of us couldn't handle it, we'd throw the controller at the other person and be like, your turn.
There's definitely some scary bits when it comes to this game. Some questions I have for you when it comes to those scary aspects. Do you remember the dead hand at the bottom of the well?
That thing is horrendously terrifying. Yes.
Absolutely. That has got to be one of the most terrifying creatures in all of video gamedom. I can't imagine as a 7-year-old experiencing that because even as a teenager, I thought it was very, very creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was horrific. And then the worst part is that whenever the hands like broke apart into the little oh,
Are you talking about the wall masters as they would,
yes.
yeah, they'd land and then you attack them and
Yes.
they break into several smaller variants?
Yes, those were horrendous. 10 out of 10, don't recommend.
Were there any rumors that either of you remembered growing up about this game? Because one that comes to my mind is beating the running man, and that if you beat him, that's a key factor into obtaining the Triforce.
No, I don't remember anything, honestly. But again, I was 7.
What do you mean beat him? Because I beat him this playthrough, and all I got was piece of heart. Maybe I can't remember.
Well, I don't recall in the 3DS version, but in the N64, it is impossible to beat him.
Really?
So, one of the urban legends about beating the running man is that once you beat him, that is a critical part to getting the Triforce. But even when hacking the game, whenever you beat him or attempt to beat him, you will always lose by 1 second. So, even if you get there, he'll say, I'm totally speechless. It took you 0.0001 seconds because you can never beat this guy. He will always get there first.
I believe that. They would pull some dumb like that.
Oh yeah, you give him. Okay, yeah, I just looked up. You give him. He's part of the trading sequence. So yeah, I may not have beat him, but I definitely had to use him because
To
like
get the bunny hood.
For the mask,
yes,
right?
yep, that's what it was.
Yep, to get the bunny hood because the bunny hood, when wearing it, you actually run faster. So,
So
Missy,
yeah.
was there anything else you wanted to talk about your memories of this game?
Um, I have so many memories of this game. It's almost hard to even fathom.
Did you beat it as a kid?
Yeah, actually. It took months, mainly because the water temple.
Right.
I got stuck so bad because of the stupid moving block system. And you know how the first one that you have to do, you push back and then you have to find out where you need to pull it from?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't figure out where to pull it from. And me and my best friend literally probably took a solid 2 months trying to figure out where to go.
So, I was going to ask if you had a strategy guide, but it doesn't sound like you did. It sounds like you just brute forced the game until you finally figured it out.
I got one as a teenager, but I did not have one as a kid.
What was your favorite temple? Do you remember?
Not the water temple.
No, definitely not the water temple. That one was horrible. I would have to say the forest temple. I loved the music. I loved just the ambiance of it, and the end battle was great too.
The Forest Temple's one of my favorites as well, and that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit when I get to my history. But if you don't have anything else, Chris, what are some of your memories of the game?
Well, like you said, this came out in '98, and I was gonna throw this in there when you're talking about urban legends. I did not play this game when it came out because in '98 I was 14. Um, I'm 90% sure I was still playing my Super Nintendo and A Link to the Past because, as I've mentioned before, I was always very behind on video games. we had just gotten a PC, so I was spending pretty much all my time playing Quake and Warcraft. And yeah, so and plus, and I've mentioned before, I never had a 64, so I completely missed out on this. But I do remember all the hype for it, all the advertising, and Sean, and I'm sure I hope you will remember this. Do you remember back then the internet was still very much the Wild West and a lot of crazy stuff on the internet that was very accessible to anybody? Do you remember Zelda.com?
I do. But let's not talk about
No,
that.
no. But I just remember all the hype, and I even remember news stories saying, like telling parents, don't let your kids go to Zelda.com. I'm not going to say what the website is. Don't go there. I don't even know if it's still up anymore, but that was my childhood memory as Zelda. As far as my first playthrough, I didn't play until I was much older. This game does hold a special spot in my heart because about a decade ago, I was going through a super rough spot, as a lot of people do. And during that time, I had pretty much lost all interest in everything. I couldn't find joy in anything. And I was given the advice to force yourself to do things that you used to do in order to make yourself happy. And I've always been into video games, so I was like, all right, I need to play video games. And I had just heard that Robin Williams said that was the best video game of all time. He named his daughter Zelda. And I looked it up, and yeah, Ocarina of Time was listed as the greatest game of all time. So I was like, okay, this is going to be the game I play to try to be happy. And so I downloaded it on the Wii Virtual Console. That was like $8. And at the time, I was also working an insane amount of hours. So whatever little time I did have, I used to spend playing Ocarina of Time, and it sucked me right in. Like everybody knows, like, man, I don't want to sound dramatic here, but when you're going through a rough spot, it is like I was dealing with some depression and stuff, and we're going through that stuff. It really is hard to find enjoyment in anything. And
Absolutely, I understand.
Yeah, but this
absolute
game,
mood.
yeah, but this game, literally right from the get go, it was fun. It made me feel I was excited about playing video games. It took me back to the excitement of playing games as a kid. I enjoyed it right from the get go. Unfortunately, my memory from that time period is absolutely horrible, so I don't remember a whole lot of details. I'm pretty sure I got stuck in the water temple, but yeah,
Which is not surprising, especially
yeah,
if you don't have the memories of a kid playing it.
yeah. But
Welcome to the Water Temple Club.
I will admit, and like I said, I had very little time to actually play anything. So like I was playing this game at like I said, my memory's crap, but I think I was playing this game for months before moving on to anything else. And I only made it, man, I want to say to the water temple, maybe. Yeah, I think it was the water temple, and is where I ended up getting stuck. But when I was getting up to that point, I used to spend like my little when I get breaks at work or stuff, I was looking stuff up. Like this game got my interest back in video games and got me interested in stuff, and I was looking up guides and looking up little tips and tricks and looking up little like maps and where to go, and it sucked me in. And one thing I really do remember though is that, like I said, I loved Link to the Past, and that was one of the reasons I was interested in this game in the first place, because Link to the Past is still one of my favorite games. So anyways, sorry, I'm rambling. But when I started playing this game, I love the fact that it was 3D compared to Link to the Past, and it just felt so different, but yet still the same. Does that make sense? Like it didn't feel out of place for a Zelda game.
I absolutely understand, and I have very similar feelings on the matter.
Yeah. I mean, they completely changed the game, changed the setup, changed their approach, and it still felt just like Zelda. You still felt like you were in Hyrule. And it was just such a great feeling. And this game will forever have a special spot in my heart because of, like, this game was very therapeutic for me and very helpful. And since I played it as an adult, it wasn't exactly challenging gameplay, but it was enjoyable. It was so enjoyable. Like I said, it helped pull me out of a pretty bad funk. It was great. It wasn't too challenging, but the dungeons, the puzzles were good, fun. Like I should say, the combat wasn't challenging. The puzzles were classic Zelda puzzles. And I didn't play. I mean, I didn't beat it when I played it back then. I can't remember why I stopped playing it, but eventually I did, and I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure it's the water temple where I got stuck, because I remember a few years later, my little nephew was playing it on his 3DS. He's like, "Check it out! Hey, Uncle Topher, look, I'm playing Ocarina of Time," and he's like, "I'm stuck on the water temple. Can you help me here?" I was like, "No," but that was my main memory of it, and that was one of the best $8 I ever spent, was getting this game on the Wii Virtual Console. And like I said, I didn't play it, so I'm super glad that we had this episode to talk about it, because I was really looking forward to closing that door. So
God, to think that you bought a game for $8, that is a miracle in its own right.
oh man, the Wii Virtual Console was great.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Chris. And let's take a short break. When we come back, I'll talk about my childhood memories, and I want you guys to just add anything you can think of when it comes to any memories that you still have of your own. So stick around. When we come back, we're going to talk about more of Ocarina of Time back in the day. Welcome back, everyone. So during our break, Missy was brave enough to check out what Zelda.com is today. And fortunately, for anyone else out there that's curious,
Very
Nintendo,
fortunate.
Nintendo has since taken it over, and it now forwards to the official Legend of Zelda webpage.
Inquiring minds had to know.
So talking about my childhood memories of this game, before I talk about the Ocarina of Time, I have to talk about my first experience with the Nintendo 64. I had seen it at store kiosks and I saw commercials for it on television, but I didn't get my hands on one until after its release. And I told a story about how I'd seen it in the Toys R Us. So check out our Star Fox 64 episode to hear more about that experience. But my uncle had gotten one around launch, and I remember being in his house and seeing Mario's polygonal face on the screen and being absolutely floored watching his kids like grab his nose and pull it. And I just knew that I had to have my own. And with that, it meant eventually getting my hands on Zelda 64, as it was called before it was officially titled. I was still a Nintendo Power subscriber at this point, and I remember exactly when I first heard about the 3D Legend of Zelda. Nintendo Power had like two screenshots from a demo showing Link fighting a shiny looking knight that was probably a very early version of an Iron Knuckle. Anyhow, I got this magazine just a few days after my birthday, and I distinctly remember poring over every page, but I just kept coming back and rereading those 2 or 3 paragraphs over and over again. And during our short break, I Googled it. It was the January 1996 Volume 80 in Nintendo Power that first revealed Zelda 64. So from the first reveal, it was around 2 years until that game came out.
Jeez, what a wait, especially for a kid.
Especially for a kid. And from this point, I just stayed glued to anything Zelda related. The marketing for this game was insane. There were commercials featuring the game, there were ads done in tons of different magazines. One of them was the Ye Snooze, Ye Lose, showing an image of the golden cart. And in the ad, it stated that pre orders started on October 24th, 1998. Obviously, I don't remember these exact details, but I have memories of the ad. So I hunted it down and I posted it in our little group, and I'll put it in the main Discord as well. But I knew I had to have this game. I had to have that cart. And the wait for October was an eternity. Fortunately, we had an electronics boutique in our mall, and you may remember it, Chris.
What was it called? Or is that the
Electronics
name of it?
Electronics Boutique.
I don't remember that. Yeah.
You don't? That was the name before GameStop eventually took it over.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, and I begged my mother to pre-order it because I wanted that golden cart. And my birthday's in December, and I told her I didn't care about anything else. I needed this. So she took me to the mall that weekend and we pre-ordered it. As I mentioned, the game was released on November 23rd in North America, but she made me wait for my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
The wait.
Wait, so instead of giving it to you for Christmas, she made you wait the extra 6 days?
Yeah. So my birthday is on December 31st. So I didn't get it on Christmas. Okay, it made that birthday one of the most positively special ones of all time, but the wait was absolutely brutal. But eventually the
Especially
game
since
was,
you knew you had it.
yes, I knew I had it.
Were there any times when your mom was out of the house and you were like digging through like drawers or closets looking for it?
So
Be honest. Be honest.
yes, in my parents' bedroom, in her bedroom, they have a large closet. And that's where she stored like birthday presents while we were growing up. And I was like, okay, I'm a teenager, I shouldn't be doing this, but I was looking. I was looking for it, but I never found it. So she wised up and she hid it from me, or maybe she had it at someone else's house. But either way, it wasn't until
Oh.
December 31st of 1998 that I finally got my hands on that game.
Will you do me a favor?
What's that?
Will you text your mom and ask where she was hiding the game? Because she knew you were gonna look for it. Like,
So I've
my
asked her
parents
about
never caught on to that.
I've asked her about this stuff before. She's like, Sean, I don't remember any of this video game stuff. I bought you kids
Oh.
toys. She's like, I love you guys, but I wasn't thinking about it. They were just,
That sounds like my mom's answer.
I bought them. It's just like going grocery shopping for me. I don't remember.
yeah. And she has no ties to it like you do with your son. So she just didn't care. The only game, and this is obviously not about Ocarina of Time, but the only game that I have played with my mother is a game called Yar's Revenge for the Atari 2600. So the character Yar, I guess, is a mutant fly, and it's very pixelated and looks very weird. And my mother and I actually got matching tattoos of it because that's the only memory that we share together of video games.
That's really cute.
Precious.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like the only thing we ever bonded over when it came to video games.
Please
Obviously,
put a
there's a lot
picture
of
of that tattoo. Throw that picture in the Discord.
All right, I will, and I'll ask her
And
to take a photo of hers too.
The only game me and my mom ever bonded over was Super Mario Brothers,
which is a great
ever
game.
play.
And what a game to bond over.
Classic.
Because it's a lot more in depth than Yar's Revenges. There's only one screen to that game. It's an Atari game, there's not a lot to it.
Yeah.
But eventually Ocarina was in my hands, and I remember playing it constantly. And I was constantly comparing it to Mario 64, but in a good way. The two games brought two of the biggest video game characters of all time to the third dimension in such an amazing way. That title screen, seeing Link riding a horse just set my mind into this frenzy, thinking about the possibilities of controlling that horse as I ride through Hyrule. And the first time seeing Hyrule Field, it was huge. And I thought the environment around Peach's castle was big in Mario 64, but this just blew it out of the water. This was enormous.
And one thing I never knew was the fact that you said that they were developed at the same time.
As well as Mario Kart 64, all three
Yeah.
games had simultaneous development. But one thing that I think this game does so much more than Mario 64 is the in-engine cutscenes that seamlessly broke up the action and expanded on the story. And we haven't even really talked about what the story is. The game begins with the Great Deku Tree. He senses this evil moving across the land, and he sends Navi to the boy without a fairy to be his companion. And she explains to you that the Deku Tree is in danger and that you're the only one that can save him. So after obtaining the sword and shield, you must defeat the evil within the Deku Tree and then find Princess Zelda. And she tells you about your mission to obtain the 2 other spiritual stones to enter the Temple of Time. And from there, use the Triforce to stop the evil Ganondorf. Unfortunately, he's laying in wait until you enter the chamber with the Master Sword, and then he takes the Triforce for himself. But because of the imbalance in his heart, the Triforce is split into 3 different pieces, and he is given the Triforce of Power, where you learn later on that you have the Triforce of Courage, and Princess Zelda has the Triforce of Wisdom. But removing the Master Sword from the pedestal hurls you 7 years into the future, and you're told by the Sage of Light, Rauru, that your entire quest requires you to save the remaining sages before confronting Ganondorf. And a little known fact, Rauru, the Sage of Light, is the owl that you see earlier in the game named Gapora Gabora.
Hold up.
What?
Yes.
I mean, you said little known fact, but I mean, like, do they ever? I just beat this game. I don't remember them spelling that out. Did I miss a line somewhere?
No, it is not mentioned in the game itself, but later on, Nintendo released what's called the Hyrule Historia, which is this very thick, hardback book. And I'm glad we're talking about it because this brings up another point that I want to mention, because the Hyrule Historia, it brought a lot of controversy because it detailed the official Nintendo sanctioned Zelda timeline. Because that was something that was constantly debated about where all the games fit in this timeline. And Ocarina of Time, this is via Nintendo, is where the timeline branches off into 3 separate timelines. You have the adult timeline, in which Link has disappeared from Hyrule after being sent back in time after defeating Ganon. You have the child timeline that you follow in game with Zelda returning you to your younger body, and this moves on to Majora's Mask. And then the controversial 3rd timeline, the Fallen Hero timeline, where Ganon has defeated Link and continues on with spreading evil across Hyrule. A lot of Zelda fans were pretty pissed off about this because they made this 3rd timeline to kind of shoehorn the rest of the series in, called the Fallen Hero timeline, where
Right. And I was
where
looking
Link
that up.
loses. But you can lose in any other game. So what made this so special to deserve its own timeline? I don't
Maybe
know.
they just didn't know where else to put anything, so they're just like, we're just gonna put it here.
I think that's it. And I don't think that the timeline was anything that was ever really a thing, because you had Zelda 1, its direct sequel, Zelda 2, and then you had A Link to the Past, which specifically says that it's before the other 2 games.
Right.
And then you have Link's Awakening, which is a sequel to A Link to the Past. And then the very next game was Ocarina of Time. So, I mean, obviously this wasn't meant to be this continuation of a story or have this grandiose story to it, but fans are going to speculate, and they did. And eventually Nintendo they felt the need to come out and give an
Clarify.
official timeline.
So besides the timeline, can I circle back to the owl?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right.
I hate him. I hate him.
Okay, do you hate him because when you finish the dialogue tree,
Yes, I'm not even gonna let you finish that. Just yes.
Because if you're spamming through his dialogue tree and you keep hitting the button, it starts over.
Yes.
exactly.
Literally could keep you going for like 20 minutes just because of how long the story is to try and mash through.
Yeah, you're
and
like,
then
when is this
mess
guy
up.
gonna shut up? Oh, I'm an idiot.
Hated it.
but you meet the Sage of Light Rauru, and that moment in time, that moment in the game is just burned into my brain. It's just seared in my memories because the Temple of Time is just, it's beautiful and mysterious, and the whole thing was just really magical to me. Despite how plain looking it might look today, it looks even better on the 3DS. That they really did some great
Mhm.
stuff with
I will
that
give
game.
you that, absolutely. Except if we're going by the 3DS, I don't like what they did to the Rainbow Bridge.
I do agree with you there. But the reveal of Adult Link was just utterly mind blowing. It was everything that I wanted in a Zelda game up to that point. And I have to caveat this next part by saying that I'm a huge Zelda 2 fan. And when I was wandering around that huge room in the water temple, only to turn around and see a figure standing beneath the tree and going over to them and discovering that it's Dark Link, that was earth shattering to me. I know I'm kind of skipping all over the place, but just when I think about Adult Link, the next memory that comes into my mind is Dark Link in the water temple.
I had such a hard time beating him the first time. I'm not gonna lie.
Well,
I've
I
heard
mean,
that's actually the hardest fight in the game. Like,
well, just like in Zelda 2 on the NES, like he mirrors all your moves. So he can be a huge pain in the ass. But just like in Zelda 2, you can cheese him, and you can definitely do so here in Ocarina of Time. So the giant sword, I don't know if you guys ever bought it from one of the big
hell yeah.
Gorons.
Oh,
So you can,
absolutely. That thing is the best thing out of the entire game.
well, there's the giant sword and there's the Begoron sword. So the giant sword can break, and you just get the hilt of it. And during that fight with Dark Link, if you swing at him with the Master Sword, he will jump on top of your sword and then strike you. But if you have the giant sword and you break it and all you have is just that part of the hilt, he can't jump on your sword, and you can just spam it and you can hit him with that.
So, guys, I'm gonna go grab my 3DS and I'm gonna try this out.
It
I
makes
had
the
the
fight so much easier.
the big or the the completed sword.
The
How do you say it?
Begoron sword.
The
Begoron.
Bigoron. I kept
That's
calling
the
it the
sword I
Biggin sword.
got.
Yeah, so it's just there's the Gorons, and this is the big Goron sword. So the big Goron.
So I
I
had the
love
big
that
Goron sword by
sword.
then, and I just beat the snot out of him with it. It wasn't even a hard fight at all for me.
Most people don't have it by then because they just don't know, especially if this is their first playthrough. But a
Yeah.
lot of people typically have the giant sword by then.
See, the first time I played through, I knew it was there because that's when I was looking up all the walkthroughs and stuff like that. But I never got the sword. This time, I'm like, all right, I'm doing this the right way. I'm getting all the good stuff. So I got that sword as soon as I could.
So, Missy, you mentioned the Forest Temple being your favorite temple. One thing you may not know is that each of those ghosts, those Poe sisters, they all have a unique name to them.
I knew that, but I didn't remember that.
Their names are Joel, Beth, Amy, and Meg. And they're actually named after Louisa May Alcott's novel, Little Women.
That's hilarious.
So they weren't the only characters to get unique names like that. That is, in the American version, the four carpenters that end up getting captured, they have names like Ichiro, Jiro, Shiro, and Saburo. But in Germany, the translators took the liberty in renaming those characters, and they named them John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
Oh, lovely.
Wow,
So
that's
if you
great.
don't know who that is, those are the first names of the iconic English rock band, the Beatles. Chris, what was your favorite dungeon? I asked Missy, but I didn't ask you.
Does the final castle count as a dungeon?
Sure does.
I really
Because
like the final castle. I liked how it was basically just like a little quick puzzle, a little combination of everything.
yeah, it kind of forced you to use all of the items
Exactly.
and
You got
tools that
to
you.
yeah, you got to use your entire grab bag of tricks all in one place.
How did you guys feel about using Epona? Like, what were your thoughts back in the day of finally getting a horse to
Back in
ride
the day,
around
I
on?
was so excited for Epona until I actually tried to use like Epona, and then I realized that like the actual mechanics of Epona, like you needed to be spot on with.
Yeah, if you bump into literally anything, it kind of
Is,
halts you.
but it's still better than running across Hyrule Field over and over and over.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not, but like
Yeah.
when you were doing like the initial like, hey, run around in a circle and jump over these things to be able to get
Yeah.
Epona, like that sucked as a kid.
That sucked even in this playthrough.
Yeah, it's not fun about how you have to go about getting her, and that racing game that you have to do with Inigo, I think his name is. Epona, her name is actually Celtic in origin, and it derives from the appropriately named patron goddess of mares and foals.
Oh my gosh, that's way better. I thought they were just a play on
Love
the word of
that.
pony.
No, no, no. It's
Uh,
actually has some origin in Celtic history and
That's
mythology.
cool.
What was you guys' favorite item?
Ooh, I would say
I liked the boomerang. The thing was fun, especially when you were trying to get the gold skeletas in certain places.
I'm glad you said that word first because I have no idea how to pronounce that. And apparently
Skulltula.
I've
Do
been
not
pronouncing it.
quote me on it. I'm just guessing at this point. I don't think anybody knew how to say that.
I've heard it
It's
both ways. I've heard it Skulltula and Skulltula, which is what I always called it because like I think of a
skull tarantula.
I think of a tarantula. And so I was like, oh, it's a Skulltula. That's just where my brain went, but I think both are correct. Chris, what was your favorite item?
Probably the extended hook shot.
The
I know.
long shot?
Yeah, the long shot, and I know that's kind of cheesy to say, but when I finally got the long shot, it's just like yay! Like you
Hell
know.
yeah, because after you beat Dark Link, you better get something good.
What about yours?
Oh, for me? I would have to say it's the fairy bow. I think that's my favorite item
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's a good one too.
because
Okay,
I,
let's
I
break it up as a kid. What's your favorite kid item?
oh, my favorite child item?
Yeah,
Um,
because
I
it's,
would
just so everybody knows, you switch back and forth between being a kid and adult. You can't use kid items as an adult.
not all of them.
Yeah,
Um,
you can use the nuts.
I would say the Deku Nuts. I would say that similar to the fairy bow being my adult item, I would say that the slingshot was my favorite childhood item.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I think for me it would be the bambuchus or however you say them. Those things were great,
The bomb
except
chews.
yeah, but those things also sucked because you had to make sure you were spot on where you were placing them.
That mini
Yeah.
game
Oh
is
my god,
intense.
I took so long. I got it took me a few minutes just to get the first level, and I was like, yay! And then it opened up another one. I was like, no.
Well, I got to the point where I was just like, I don't even care. I'm just going for chickens.
So there's another game that involves the chest guessing game. Did you
Yeah,
know
Oh
that
yeah,
you
Eye
can
of Truth.
use
Let's
yeah,
go.
yeah,
you can use the eye of truth or the lens of truth to just quickly get through that.
yeah.
That
As a
Eye of Truth
child,
was
I did not know that.
amazing for that.
What about the Rumble Pack? Did either of you have one as a kid?
No, I wanted
No,
one though.
and like I said, I played this on the Wii and then on the 2DS, so no rumbles for me. When I was playing it on the Wii, because didn't the Rumble Pack interact with the secret finder thing?
Yes. So it's called the Stone of Agony, and that's
Right.
something you get for finding so many of those golden sculptulas that you can return them to that family, and that one of the rewards is like the adult's wallet and the giant's wallet, and
Okay, but
one of
I'm
the
so mad at what the prize is when you get them all. So mad.
well, tell
Endless.
everybody what the prize is.
200 rupees. That's it. It's
Well, it's
bull.
endless.
It don't matter. I expected better.
Yeah, because I mean, at that point, you don't need money.
You barely need money at all because most of the items that you can buy, like you can buy the red vest and the blue vest, those tunics, those are story related items that are given to you anyways. But
Yeah,
they're made available in those shops because you can get eaten or devoured by likes that will take your tunics and your shield away from you.
which oh man, there's nothing that made me want to slam the sword, like spam the sword button harder than when they stole my stuff. I'm like, give it back.
Likes are so annoying. I
Yeah.
know. But they could have thought of something better than just 200 rupees for going through all of that for those stupid things. Ugh, so frustrated.
So I was going to mention it in my replay, but I'll just talk about it here because we're on the topic. There is an area outside of Hyrule Castle that you can bomb the ground and it will open up a little area for you to drop into. And
Mhm.
there is a
Isn't there
Skulltula
a
there.
cow in there too?
Yes.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So what you can do is that you can attack the Skulltula and then you can throw your boomerang and immediately step into the transporter. You will capture the Skulltula, you'll get the credit for it, but you're teleported above ground. You can drop right back down and do it all over again.
Really?
Yes.
Because I did not get all
Huh.
100 Skulltulas. I got 97. And at that point, I looked up the guide of how to find them, and I was looking through it. I'm like, I have no idea where this is at. Like, I have no idea what 3 I'm missing.
I think John actually found out that secret when we were younger. And I've been using it ever since. I don't even know if it's something that is known out there, but I've been using that secret this whole time. Like, I don't even bother. If they're in my path, I'll get them. But to get the 100, and you can get way more than 100, obviously, I just use that trick over and over again.
That's kind of
Well,
because,
that's
and it's cheating, but you still reunite the family, and that's the important part.
That's the important part.
I'm kind of okay with that just because I'd like to just get it out of the way.
Yeah. And at first, I was like on this playthrough, because I like once you get the big wallet, like it doesn't matter. Who cares about everything else, right? But like this playthrough, I was like, okay, I want to do it. Like I want to try to 100% as much of this as I could. So, so when I got to 97 and the game was almost over, I was like, wait, where's the last 3? I have no idea. And I looked up the guide. I had no clue where my missing 3 were. I was going over like because if you go to zeldadungeon.net or something like that, they have very
Yep.
good walkthroughs.
Yeah.
And I was going through their Skulltula guide one by one, trying to remember. Wait, had I been there? Had I not? And I couldn't remember. And I eventually just said, "Screw it. I'm just. It is what it is. I'm beating the game."
And like Missy said, the prize isn't that great.
No,
But
but yeah, for me, it's just that weird. Like as weird as it sounds, I just wanted I
You
wanted the
wanted
family
it.
to be whole. Yep.
the completionist aspect.
Yep.
But I think we're starting to get into our replays. So now that we've finished recounting our memories of Ocarina of Time, let's take a break. And when we return, we're going to dive into our thoughts of replaying this game 25 years later. Before we talk about our replays, while doing some research, I was looking up anything and everything surrounding Zelda in 1998, and I mentioned commercials earlier in the history, and they really leaned into that old English. Like I mentioned it before, the ye snooze, ye lose. And while I was looking for a high quality one to rip the music of, I noticed that they had decided to change their marketing material because if you YouTube it, there's a couple different commercials out there. So at one point during one of the commercials, it says, "And in the end, wilt thou soar or wilt thou suck?" Nothing crazy, but in the original ad, it said, "And in the end, wilt thou get the girl or play like one?"
Oh,
Me in 1998,
Shots fired.
I'm not going to think anything of that. You know, I was a kid, but today I find it fascinating that this supposedly went through multiple layers of management,
right.
all of them giving the okay, all the way up to being broadcasted in North America before somebody was like, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't alienate a huge chunk of our audience before the game even comes out. Because in Japan, The Legend of Zelda, the franchise as a whole, is much more popular with women than it is with men.
Really?
Yes.
And I don't mean to sound like an asshole by saying really like that, but
I mean,
it,
it's something you wouldn't think of necessarily, but that's how it is. It's much more popular amongst women, whereas in America, it's much more of a quote unquote boys game.
It slightly makes sense though, just for the fact that it wasn't like a shooter type game. If this makes sense.
Well, for sure, but we're talking about like all of Zelda history. Like even the very first one that came out in the late 80s, that was more popular in Japan amongst the female crowd.
I don't know. I guess Link just has a thing with the ladies.
Well, it's just something that I found to be interesting. And eventually this commercial was pulled and they replaced it with the one that I talked about, the "Wilt thou soar, wilt thou suck." But who okay, it doesn't matter that was 1998. I'm glad that they are no longer trying to pull that crap. So Chris, why don't you start us off with your replay of Ocarina of Time? How did you play it and what are your thoughts?
so I played this on the 2DS, and it was amazing. I mean, it's the same game as I remember on the Wii, on the Wii Virtual Console. So the 64 version. It's the same game, but the graphics look better. The lighting is cooler. The controls are so much better, and the fact that you gave me the tip to use the what do you got the aiming where you actually move
The
the
gyro.
whole yeah the
Yeah,
gyro
it has
controls.
gyroscopic moves. Yep.
Yes, it made the mini games and using a bow and hookshot so much easier and smooth and kind of fun. The 3DS, 2DS version of this game is the way to play this game, and I loved it. Playing back through, I was worried it was going to be too long since I played it since the last time. I thought there was going to be too big of a gap, but I jumped right back in it. It felt like I hadn't missed a beat. It was really nice revisiting the game, and like it's kind of like visiting your old neighborhood or something. It's just such a great feeling. The game's fantastic. It still holds up. The further I got into a game, because like I said, last time I played it, I did not actually complete it. And the further I got into it, the more I enjoyed it because each dungeon gets better than the one before.
Ooh, I don't know if I agree entirely, but go ahead, keep going.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, the first few dungeons are fun, and then you have a couple weird ones, and then they get really awesome again. Because I really enjoyed the bottom of the well, the Shadow Temple, the Spirit Temple, the training grounds, and then finally the castle. I loved all of those, and the same reason I liked Ganon's castle is the same reason I like the training grounds, which is completely optional. You don't actually need to do it. It's just a fun way to use all your tools in your toolbox, and instead of most dungeons where you get your gimmick stick and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm using this here, and then you're using it up until the next dungeon until you get your new one, and then you don't use anything else again. So the training grounds in Ganon's castle I like because you're using your whole bag of tricks. But one thing I love about this game is that, and I noticed it very clearly this time, is that the game has such a great curve to it that it doesn't feel I don't know how to describe it. So, and even when I took notes on this, I didn't know how to describe it in the notes. The game has such a nice curve, a nice flow to it. It doesn't feel like you are progressing in big blocks. Instead, the game naturally progresses and you progress along with it. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I get that.
the game just kind of
Has a great flow. It just has a great flow from front to front to finish.
when I say
And
the
I really
game
love it.
when I say the game holds your hand, I don't mean in a negative way, but the game just kind of brings
Guides
you
you.
along. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And that's kind of what I mean. Like, it doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't baby you, but it does as the story progresses and as the dungeons progress, and as you're doing more and more amazing, cool stuff. It doesn't feel unnaturally clunky. Or one way I can compare it to is playing the Batman Arkham series. When you get to a certain point in the game, like you have to get this thing in the toolbox and in your bat belt, and then all of a sudden it unlocks a bunch more things, and it's big chunks at a time. Whereas this, it's just smooth and natural, and it's really nice, and you feel like you are becoming more of the hero that they keep talking about in the game, but it doesn't feel like you are a different character than when you started, if that makes sense.
I think that's a great way of putting it.
Well, thank you. And like I said, and then this playthrough, I unlocked, unless there are secret things that I don't know about, I unlocked everything that I could except for the 3 Skulltulas. I did not get the. Did you guys do fishing? How much time did you guys put into fishing?
Oh, I love fishing. That is literally one of my favorite parts of this game.
I did not get the what's that mega fish
The
in the bottom?
loach.
Yeah, I did not get that thing. The
big old lunker.
The barracuda.
There's the Hylian loach, which you cannot put in the glass cabinet. You have to release them.
Yeah. So besides that, I did as much as I could. I got as I call it, the biggin sword, because it's my biggin, and I got the ice arrows from doing the training grounds, and then I went through, and one of my biggest complaints is just the fact that the Ganon fight was too easy, and that might have been because I had way too many hearts, and I had my biggin sword, and I might have been over prepared for the fight, but like I said, like the dungeons get harder and you're doing cooler and cooler stuff. And then when you do Ganon's fight, all of a sudden Ganon's fight was, I don't know for you guys, but it just seemed really easy for me. But
I agree with that.
But I loved it. Like I absolutely love this game, and I'm so glad I can finally say I beat this. And speaking of beating it, I might be jumping ahead. Am I allowed to talk about the master class right now? Master Quest?
Yeah, go for it.
So I had no idea that was even a thing, and when I beat it, I even put in Discord right away. I was like, "Master Quest, what?" Like, and I started it, and oh my gosh, that is the real game. I thought it was going to be just like a replay through this, but like maybe you get twice as much damage dealt to you or something like that. No, it's got different. Like I've only got through the Deku tree so far, but the layout is completely different. There are new rooms and there are new enemies that I don't remember seeing before, like the little egg guys that come out that hatch out the eggs. I have no idea what they're called.
The little Goma like spawn
The babies.
Yeah. The boss spawns. Those things are littered throughout the Deku tree right from the get-go. The Master Quest is basically, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the Dark Souls version of Ocarina of Time, because I got slaughtered so many times, and like
that is such a good way of putting that.
Yeah,
and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the entire world map mirrored as well?
Yes, the world map is mirrored, but I don't believe the Deku, like inside the dungeon, doesn't look mirrored, because like I said, it's
every dungeon is remixed.
Yeah, the dungeons are completely brand new, and the world map is mirrored. So everything that was, west is now east, and vice versa. And I had no idea that version existed, and that's currently what I'm playing, and I'm still planning on playing through that, because I'm not sick of this game yet. So On to one of you guys.
So Missy, what about
Yeah,
you? I
the
think you mentioned
nostalgia
that you
factor was
also played it.
high.
I think you also played it on the 3DS.
Yeah, I did. I don't have my N64 anymore, sadly.
Well, tell us about your thoughts about replaying this game today.
So the nostalgia factor was really high, especially since this time it was like a solo play versus when I was a kid. I used to, trade off with my best friend and everything. But I think for me it was just it really brought me back to like how I felt as a kid, like seeing all the enemies and everything. Like I felt the same fears as when I was a kid. I was like, "Oh god, this is terrifying."
But also, I assume the same excitement too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like I haven't played this game in easily a decade and everything just felt so fresh and so new. But I won't lie, in the back of my head I was kind of just like if they were to like remaster a game, I would want it to be this.
This so
I
much.
would want to see this
Yes.
remastered so bad. Just because of what I've seen with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, I would love to see those kind of graphics with this. It'd be beautiful.
Now, which one of you shared the video of somebody who did remaster this
That was
in
me.
Oh,
That was me.
that looks so cool.
It
Yeah, they're using
does.
the Unreal 5 engine, I believe.
Yeah, but just to see that remastered be just amazing. Ugh, beautiful.
Yes.
Chef's kiss. But the difference with like the 3DS versus the N64, yeah, a lot of it's a lot more graphically pleasing, but at the same time, I feel like they went a little overboard with the rainbow.
That's the second time you mentioned it. But tell us what are your thoughts on it? What are you thinking when you say that?
Um, in some aspects it helped, like in the water temple when they added the colors to like the specific levels and stuff. That was beautiful. Then you get to, like I said earlier, the Rainbow Bridge. Like that looked like it straight up came out of a Mario game. Not gonna lie. I was like, what is this?
But it's such a small part of the game, right?
It doesn't matter. I was so excited to see like the original Rainbow Bridge, and then I saw that and I was like, that does not look like it should be here.
Oh, see, now I'll have to Google the original because, like I said, I didn't beat it
It's just
my first time.
it's like a plain rainbow bridge, like super basic.
Oh, and now it's got
And now it's
it's
yeah.
diamond. It
Yes.
looks like something out of Land Before, or no, Never Ending Story. That's what it
Yes.
reminds me of.
And then on top of it, during the Ganon fight, like his little tail used to just be like this bright yellow, just flashing thing, and now it's just a rainbow garbage mess.
Yeah, they made it really obvious that, hit me here.
I mean, even in the original game, like I said, it was just a bright yellow flashing light, so it was pretty obvious. But again, they put rainbow where rainbow shouldn't be.
I want to make another comment about the Ganon fight. The difference between the 3DS version and the N64 version, the 3DS version is so much brighter.
Yes, I agree with that.
So
A
he's
lot
so much
brighter.
more imposing and frightening and terrifying.
Evil.
Yes, evil. He's so much more evil looking in the N64 version where you just see these flashes of lightning and you just see his eyes just kind of glowing at you as
And his
he's
swords.
as he's transforming from Ganondorf to Ganon.
Yeah, and now it's just I see every detail possible.
Another little touch there that I really think goes a long way. And I'm sorry if I'm talking over you.
No,
I'm
you're
sorry. Go
good.
ahead. Okay, so one little touch that I think goes a long way is that the rest of the bosses they get titles with them. So it's like parasitic armored arachnid Goma or subterranean lava dragon Volvagia. With him, it's just Ganon. There's no title. The game's like, you know who he is. Get ready.
Yep.
So my apologies, Missy. Go ahead. Keep going. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
I guess like going into it as an adult and playing multiple different Zelda games, it kind of also made me think of like the present games and like how many different almost like Easter eggs there are to Ocarina of Time in the newer games, if that makes sense.
It does, but why don't you elaborate on that?
So obviously in the last couple of years I have played so much Breath of the Wild because that's just been the game. And the dragon from the fire temple it looks like the dragons from Breath of the Wild kind of took their like take from that. And if you look at the names of the dragons in Breath of the Wild, it's kind of almost a take on, what are the stupid spells that you have in this game? Like Din's fire.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Feyor's
Rare
Wind.
gems.
Yes, all of the dragons are based off of that.
Well, all of those names, Din and Feyor and all that, those are the names of the three goddesses that created the Triforce.
Right.
Oh.
Yes.
So it's crazy to see how everything kind of collaborates together.
And in Ocarina of Time, the only one of those that's required is Din's fire, and you only need it one time, and that's to light all those torches simultaneously.
Oh man, I don't think I even used the other ones at all.
You don't need to.
I don't think I really did.
Yeah,
either.
but I mean, I had them, but I don't think I even used them. Like, not even to see what they do. Isn't one a protection spell and the other? What is the other?
The other lays down like a teleportation, like you
Oh,
initiate it.
right.
See, I
Like
didn't use that because I had my scarecrow.
a dungeon warp, right?
Yes, I always forget about the scarecrow because
The scarecrow is the best.
so as a kid, I forgot this. As a kid, I just put in this really stupid song, and
You
I
couldn't remember.
that I couldn't remember.
I always went with left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right.
Well, that would have been the smart thing to do, but I was not a smart child.
I am not saying I was the brightest of the bunch either, but
So wait, how do you use your scarecrow instead of using the teleport thing?
a lot of times what'll happen is Navi will go to a certain spot and turn green in kind of like an area where you can't get to, and then
right.
you take out your ocarina and get up there.
Right, but I mean, but the dinge or wait, what crystal was it? Didn't that basically just teleport you to the beginning of any dungeon?
Oh, yeah. Well,
It,
you could also just use your ocarina at that point.
yeah, you can always go back to the beginning
Yeah.
of the dungeon that way. I'm reading it right now. It allows Link to return to the entry of the dungeon that he is in.
So yeah, so use your ocarina instead.
And the other one is Naryu's Love, and that's the one that creates the barrier around you.
Right. Which
I don't
what,
think
half
I
damage or
have
something like
ever
that?
used that.
I didn't even pick those up on this playthrough. I went and got Din's Fire because it's necessary, and I didn't even bother with the other two.
Can we talk about how weird those fairies look?
Chris,
Oh my
you're
goodness,
reading my mind.
so bad. It kind of reminds me if
I
like
call
they
them the
tried.
horny fairies.
It kind of reminds me if they took Cynthia and dyed her hair pink.
Oh, yes, from Rugrats.
Yes.
I'm glad that you
Sean's
guys.
like, what?
No, I know exactly what you meant, and I'm glad you guys brought this up. I didn't want to forget it. So something else I thought of. None of us have talked about Navi and
Being
how
so obnoxious.
How horrible she is and how I just ignore her. Yeah.
back in the day I was like, oh my God, it's constant. But replaying it now, I realize that it's only because I'm going in the wrong place or I'm spending too much time somewhere that I shouldn't be. And she's like, hey, get back on track.
Hello. Hey.
One
Listen.
one thing that I noticed playing on a 2DS, whenever I was like pausing the game, I would just put it into sleep mode. And I would save the game, but I would put it in sleep mode. So I think Navi thought like I was just playing this game continuously for 18 hours straight, because she was always telling me, "Hey, aren't you tired? Why don't you save and take a break?" Like, I just took a break. Did you guys get that at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Yeah, it's still bad even to this day.
Some other great quality of life improvements that are on the 3DS are like the boots that you can equip them to C buttons.
Yes,
Yes.
I did like that. That was great.
Oh yeah, and just I mean the touch screen came in so handy.
Oh,
For just
yeah.
like
Yeah.
that, and just having your map there all the time, and man, the 2DS, 3DS is really such a huge improvement over the 64.
I just liked the fact that if I was in a pinch, I could quickly do either hover boots or the sinking boots, and then
Mm-hmm.
ta-da, and go about my business. I didn't have to go screen hop and pray to Jesus.
Yeah, you didn't have to open up your menu and then, select the boots or deselect the boots. And so, Missy, is there anything else you want to talk about your replay today?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
For me, I replayed this game, and I was telling you guys, this is for everybody. I replayed this game 3 separate times. I played it on a real N64, I played it on the NSO on the Switch, and I played it on my 3DS XL. And of the 3, I think I enjoyed it on the Switch the most because
Really? Oh yeah.
Because you got
because
cheats.
because I had a one of the N64 controllers that you can buy, and I got to play it on a big screen TV, and it runs so much better than an actual N64, where you get like max at 20 frames per second on that game, and it's not much better on the Switch. It's just smoother, I feel.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna need that link for that controller because I want to play it on my 70-inch screen TV.
It makes everything so much better, and it really is a game changer when it comes to playing any of those N64 games, because that's how I played Star Fox 64 as well. And Chris, I think you played Star Fox on the 3DS.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so the N64 games we played have been ported over to the 3DS, fortunately. But it was a great way to play it. But as far as experiencing this game, oh, go ahead, Chris, before I get
Oh, I was
started.
gonna say, now is that is that a port or emulated from the 64, or is it like a 3DS version on the Switch?
It's the Nintendo 64 version on the Switch.
So it still has like the old. I mean, the graphics are pretty much the same, but you could tell like the 3DS is polished up a little bit more.
Well, the
So
3DS has like brand new models and brand new textures, and they're high res textures and everything. It is the N64 version being brought to the Switch. Everything is cleaned up though. It looks
okay,
significantly better because it's not on a CRT either. So everything is clean and crisp, and it's not blurry or anything like that.
what Rainbow Bridge did you have?
The same from the N64.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I just posted in our current cast chat, and it shows the differences between the two, and they are vastly different. One looks like it came out of Mario 64, where the other was, like Missy was saying, that old school Rainbow Bridge. So that's just something to think about. But as far as my replay, I didn't take a lot of notes about the game itself, and I really wrote about how I felt playing this game. And the game, really, from the time that you start it, you were almost immediately into the action. So you get a little bit of exposition as the game starts, and there's a little bit of story stuff involved. And like I said, you have to get your sword and shield, but you're thrown into a dungeon relatively quickly. Even if you had never played this game before, you can figure it out, and it's pretty fast to the action. And the
Mm-hmm.
game also is immediately extremely emotional. You watch the Deku Tree die, and then you basically have to sneak off from Kokiri Forest, leaving behind your only friend, Saria.
And can we talk
But
about the annoying
You're gonna
kid?
make me cry because now I'm thinking about little Sprout.
the Deku Sprout, yeah, because he comes back later on in the game after you complete the Forest Temple. But what were you about to say, Chris?
That annoying kid that's like who's just upset that all of a sudden like
Oh, how dare you have a sword and shield now? I suppose you can get through, Mido.
you're not
Yes.
a real you're not
Yeah.
one of us. You're not allowed in here. What do you
So
mean he
that's
wants to talk to you?
Mido, and
Yeah.
he's the one that demands that you have a sword and shield before you go see the Deku Tree. And when I talk about how emotional this game is, when you come back to the Kokiri Forest as an adult, none of them recognize you because
Yeah.
they have no concept of aging, because they do not age inside the forest. They never grow up.
They're
But
the Lost Boys.
they even say that you remind them of someone they knew. And you get a little bit of insight into Mito, and he even seems a little remorseful for having picked on you as a kid. And I think it's just one of those one of those things that when you know the entirety of the game, that yes, you do end up getting sent back to your childhood body, but you are no longer that child that you were at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, you're still
Yeah.
your consciousness transfers from one body to the other. You go back knowing what you know now. It's switching back and forth. It's really cool.
And when you think about it, all of that history is basically it's future history because you prevent Ganon from ever taking over power, overtaking over Hyrule.
Well,
So
and even during the play itself, like that the game does play on that a little bit with the windmill guy.
He was
He
so pissed off.
Yeah, because he refers to something that you haven't done yet, but you did it in the past, in the future.
yes, it's one of those few times that it creates a paradox of something that hasn't happened yet. It's just the game is so amazing. There's so many neat little touches like that. And I mentioned that my favorite dungeon as a child was the Forest Temple. I love the music, I love the layout, I love
Mm-hmm.
everything about it. But I think after this replay, it's got to be the Spirit Temple because
Oh, okay.
much like the bottom of the well, you have to go back in time and complete a portion of the dungeon as a child and then finish it as an adult. And I think that's just really awesome.
Which, yeah, when I was playing it through this time, I went in there. I was like, okay, this is a like I said, like, oh, you must complete this as like it basically spells it out for you that you have to beat it as a child. So I went back to beat it as a child. I'm like, wow, this dungeon's really short. And then I realized, oh, I'm only halfway through. Like I have to come
Yeah,
back as an adult
you
again.
haven't done anything yet.
Yeah. You only basically you went back in time to set up everything that you need to do for present day.
Speaking of child to adult, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but obviously you meet Ruto as a little child, and then in the water temple you meet her as an adult, right? Did either of you guys notice on the 3DS version Link's face when she's just like, I'm your fiance?
Oh yeah, no, that's kind of like a running gag for
The
all of them.
sheer fear in his face. I never noticed that until now, and I almost died laughing.
There's some debate about all the different sages in Ocarina of Time. Once you see them again in that, I don't know what to call it, that realm that you are sealed away in for those 7 years. Because if you remember, in the Fire Temple, when you find Darunia, the leader of the Gorons, he's like, I'm gonna go face the boss alone. Well, he doesn't say the boss, but it's Volvagia, the dragon. He's like, I'm gonna go face him alone. You just kind of stay there. He never comes back. And when you fight the dragon, he's nowhere to be found.
I didn't even put that together.
So
I
the
didn't
next time you
either.
see him is in that realm where you receive his medallion. So one of the theories is that all of the sages are dead.
I kind of had
That
that
would make
impression
sense.
because they sacrifice themselves to hold that whatever the dimension whatever to guard it for all of eternity. So I kind of figure I'm like, is this their eternal afterlife or something?
Their
Like,
final resting place.
yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And when you're talking about going to your childhood form, one of the things that stuck out to me was in the Spirit Temple, like I said, it completely changed the way I thought about it, replaying it just a couple weeks ago. When you go back, you're there to help out Nibiru because you can fit through the hole that she can't.
Mm-hmm.
And she gets captured by the twin witches, Kome and Katoke.
Oh, and they just seem like they are just thrilled to torture her.
Yeah.
That's dark.
I
And
won't lie though, like I loved them as a
and
boss.
oh yeah, that is one of
Yeah.
my favorite boss fights too, and that's why I think it's so awesome. But they kidnap and brainwash her, and she lives 7 years as an iron knuckle,
Yeah.
and yeah, she's just trapped inside of that. And if you, this is obviously through hacking means, and these are things that people have found out just over the years that if you, or if you have like if you hack the ROM and you have free range with the camera. Inside each of those iron knuckles is a Gerudo maiden.
Oh, that's messed up. So that kind of reminds me of Elden Ring, or no, wait, yeah, is it? And the puppets.
A little bit. So in each of those iron knuckles that you destroy, that's a Gerudo that
Is
you
being held against their will and
being held
enslaved
against
and
their will.
mind
Damn,
controlled.
that's rough to think about.
That's dark.
And that fight with Komea and Kotoke, after you finish it, well, before you finish it, like they turn into a super boss, Twin Rova. That's pretty
Love
easy.
Twin Rova.
But at the very end, there's a cutscene where they both have these little halos and they end up floating upwards, I guess implying that heaven exists and that even evil beings like them that torture and kidnap women go to heaven.
That's crazy. But I also love the scene where they're bickering doing it.
Yes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And one thing that was weird about that though is like the little cartoon halos above their head. I'm like, that's so weird and cartoony to have in such a serious weird moment. It just struck me as odd, but
I felt like it makes sense though because of the target audience.
yeah, that's why I'm like, okay, is this just the kids, showing the kids things that they are ascending to the afterlife? But it is weird that it kind of implies that they're going to heaven. Like,
and there's so much more to this game that just there's layers and layers, because you find out later while talking to that Deku Sprout that Missy mentioned, you discover that Link was never a Kokiri, that he was a child of a Hylian mother who entered that forbidden forest, and the Deku Tree, recognizing that Link was the child of destiny, he decided to take Link in, and your mother, Link's mother, was already mortally wounded. She was dying and dies in the forest.
Yeah.
I'm actually shocked that they didn't put some kind of like weird Easter egg that like immortalized the mom in any way.
Well, not really any game outside of a few even talks about Link's family, other than like A Link to the Past, where you have your uncle. But where's your parents in that game?
And Link to the Past, I mean, he's mortally wounded right out of the gate.
Right out the gate. So for either of you, did your favorite dungeon as a child change? Or you said you were a little older, Chris, but did your favorite dungeon change during this replay?
Oh, definitely. Well, and like I said, because the first time I played through, I didn't get far enough into it. So all my favorite dungeons were after the ones I made through as my first playthrough. I really like the end game of this game. So
I feel like mine stayed the same, but I feel like boss people definitely like changed just for the fact that like I found something different in each different boss that I liked more than the one before, if that makes sense.
now I will say my least favorite dungeon hadn't changed at all. And I mean,
Oh,
and that
not at all. That one can go to hell.
no, well, mine's not actually the water temple. Mine is the giant fish belly. Like
Lord Jabba Jabba's belly.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
you
just
didn't
not
like
a fan.
becoming chum?
No, I'm just not a fan.
I'm not a fan of that level either.
Yeah, it's just so kind of, I don't know.
Almost felt like an afterthought.
I think it's just such a weird level in general.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's hard to the little, I don't know.
But guys, I think that we need to kind of bring this to a close, and let's take another break, our final break. And when we return, we're going to discuss our final thoughts on Ocarina of Time. Welcome back, everyone. That was my favorite song in the game, Gerudo Valley. So I hope that you enjoy it for one of the last songs that you're about to hear. This is our final segment where we discuss our thoughts about the entirety of the game. Chris, why don't you start us off with how you feel about Ocarina of Time as a whole? Is this something that you're going to play again, or do you feel good having played it, or are you just going to kind of shelve it?
No. I like I said, I'm still in the middle of the Master Quest. I had no idea that was even a thing, so I'm going to keep playing it. 10 out of 10 will definitely play again. If they ever remaster this, I will get it on day one. I absolutely recommend everybody to play this game. It holds up. It's a perfect game. It really is, and it aged perfectly well. Like, this game is perfect. It deserves the title of best video game of all time. It really does, and it holds up. And the graphics still look. I mean, they're not like PS5 graphics or anything, but they don't need to be. It's 10 out of 10. Highly recommend. Recommend for anybody. If you've never played a Zelda game, this would be a great one to hop in on. Yeah, I can't stop. I'm at a loss for words of how much I appreciate this game. So next.
I'm definitely with Chris on the loss of words. Like, this game just, it is everything I've ever wanted a video game to be, and then some, and it continues to be to this day. And I'm kind of on Chris's page as well. I kind of want to get back into the Master Quest and see if I can even beat that nowadays, because I remember in the past that was hard. But it will definitely be a game I go to over and over again for years to come.
I love Ocarina of Time. And when you compare it to this game's contemporary Zelda titles, it's incredibly small. But even in such a small world, there's such a huge sense of exploration and mystery to it that
Mm-hmm.
just makes this game timeless. I think it's one of the greatest games of all time, and I have virtually nothing bad to say about it. The only complaint I would have is how little changed from A Link to the Past. And by that I mean, in both games, you have to obtain 3 pendants or stones before pulling the Master Sword from its pedestal, after which you're transported to a new world. And in that world, you now have to rescue several sages, and only then you can access Ganon's castle to confront him. Fortunately, I absolutely love A Link to the Past, so I'm not upset that it's just a 3D version of that.
But isn't the kind of like the whole trope with a lot of Link games is that they kind of the same story on repeat?
Yeah, it's pretty samesies, but
Then
but
that
this
doesn't bother me at all.
it doesn't not at all.
No,
And
not in
this
the slightest.
and this game ends in such an emotional state. And I talked about it a little bit before. You've gone through so much and you've saved all of Hyrule, but no one will ever know. To them,
Yeah.
you're just some child. And physically, you are a child, but you've grown so much throughout your adventure. And now you know that you can never return to Kokiri Forest because you're not one of them. And on top of it all, your only companion throughout the entire game, Navi, leaves you. You are now more alone than you were when you first started the game because you had Saria,
Well,
but
you
you can
got
never.
Zelda now. You
That's a
made a
possibility,
you made a BFF.
but will she know you going back in time? All these things are unknown because in the sequel, Majora's Mask, it starts off with child Link, riding a child Epona through a forest because he leaves Hyrule because there's nothing there for him.
Oh man, see, and as soon as I beat Master Quest, I got it. That's the next game I'm playing.
It's a great one, Chris. It
I've
really
never
is.
played it.
And
Really? Okay.
with all that said, I don't think I have anything else to say. I think I got it all out. What about you guys?
I think I
Are we
did
gonna
as
get matching
well.
tattoos?
Absolutely.
I'm game if you ever come to Texas, Chris.
Or if you
Chris,
come to
is
Illinois?
it road trip time?
The odds of me coming back to Illinois are very, very slim.
I don't blame you. Stay as far away as possible.
Okay, if I ever come for a visit, we're getting matching tattoos.
Done. Chris, and I almost said Corey, but he's not with us. Chris and Missy, thank you so much for playing this. For everyone out there, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us. Our next game is going to be Battletoads and Battle Maniacs for the SNES. So I hope that you join us on that game as well. Hopefully, we'll have Corey back with us and we'll be playing that game. Until then, thank you so much, everyone out there. We've been Superannuated Starman.